Well, let's talk to Nick Freeman, who is a criminal defence lawyer at Freeman & Co. Solicitors, known as Mr. Loophole for getting various celebrities and politicians off driving offences. So, Nick, what is your view, first of all, of the 20 miles per hour zones?
I think it's a ridiculous idea. I think they have a very useful and valuable place during school opening times and closing times, and when there's a real need to have you at a speed where literally you can almost walk faster. I mean, you can certainly cycle faster, and the 20 mile an hour speed limit doesn't apply to bicycles because they're not bound by any speed limit. But I think just generally to roll out a 20 mile an hour speed limit across London and other cities under the pretext that it makes our roads safer. Well, you know, if we all got out of our cars, our roads would be safer still. But we need to strike a balance with what is sensible and proportionate. And just saying, right, you've got an empty road. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing about. But I tell you what, you're going to sit at 20 miles an hour, and you're a taxi driver, and that's how you earn a living. Or other people who need to get from A to B. So I would like to see flexibility, not just with 20 mile an hour speed limits, but with all speed limits. I think generally in built-up areas, 30 mile an hour speed limit is correct, but it's subject to alteration to be flexible when there's a need for it, a pressing need. And obviously, when children are at school, that certainly constitutes a pressing need, and it should be rigorously enforced. We've seen a massive reduction in speed limits in city centres, but also on country roads. And now country roads that were 60 miles an hour, they're now 40 miles an hour. And motorways are still subject to a 70 mile an hour speed limit, irrespective of the weather, irrespective of how busy they are. When that represented the maximum speed of the Ford Anglia, I think in the late 50s or early 60s, cars have come on a long way since then, and there's just no flexibility, and we're getting left behind other countries who feel that a more flexible approach. So, for example, if you're driving in France, the speed limit's 130 kilometres an hour, which is about 81 miles an hour. But if it's raining, then obviously you have to slow down. And dependent upon how inclement the weather, then the speed is indicated. And also, we have a sort of almost a speed reduction by default now because of pollution, because of smart motorways without hard shoulders. The general default position is 60 miles an hour, and you don't seem to get to that speed very often. So I think someone needs to have a look at speed limits generally and approach it with a degree of common sense that works for everyone and not just the people who are basically, in my view, an anti-motoring lobby. They seem to want to do everything they possibly can to hit the motorist, bearing in mind the motorist is largely responsible for keeping the economy going, because a lot of people are not just ferrying children around, but they're going from their place of work, they're involved in their work, and they're very busy, or they might be dealing with transport or whatever. So the motorist plays a pivotal role in the economy, and we don't need to be concentrating on making their life continuously more difficult. We need to just use some common sense and get them moving. When you're sitting at 20 miles an hour and the road's empty, you become bored, you become distracted. And in my view, that there's a temptation to start messing around with your phone, seeing what meetings you should be doing, whether you should be doing this. And of course, that in itself is a distraction. So it's counterintuitive, and it does cause a degree of distraction, which is obviously not the intention. The intention, I suppose, is to try and make the road safer. So I don't approve of it, and I think we need to just inject some common sense and have some flexibility.
Is there a way technically of doing this where you could have even cameras and everything for 20 miles an hour when it's school time and then switch it over at other times? Is that sort of too sophisticated to justify the cost of it all? I just wonder how it will work, because I can see where you're coming from, but equally there are some little roads and near schools where you think, well, no, nobody should be bombing down that.
No, I agree. They shouldn't, and it's absolutely ridiculous that they do. And anyone who's bombing down there wouldn't just be committing an offence of speeding, but they'd be committing an offence of driving without due care and attention as well. But in answer to your question, yes, if you had a general 30 mile an hour speed limit, or you could have, for example, a sign that says it's 30 miles an hour, but between 9 and 10 in the morning or 8 and 9, it's going to be 20 miles an hour, and have a sign which explains the situation so that it doesn't have to be electric signs. It doesn't have to be that expensive. It's just reduced within certain hours of the day for common sense. As far as the motorways are concerned, there should be a higher speed limit as a general rule. And if the speed limit should be reduced, well, then there are gantry systems, there are electric signs there, and it shouldn't be complex. But at the moment, it seems to be one-way traffic, if you'll excuse the pun. Everything is downwards, nothing is upwards. And it's causing a huge delay to the motorist, which is, of course, impacting adversely on the economy at a time when the economy needs to be moving. And we need to engage with drivers. We don't need to treat drivers as the enemy. We don't need to try and punish them for their every move, their every drive, their every journey. We want to encourage them to drive, albeit in a green manner, an environmentally friendly manner. But at the moment, it seems that there is a war with the motorists, and it's coming from all sides.
What's your view on speed cameras? Because there are quite a lot of those at the moment, and I'm not dead against them, but I do think they're often in the wrong places and they're not used correctly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Clive. I think in certain places, and the original idea was for accident black spots, I think they're very useful. And we also have mobile vans. But what's happened is we've become reliant on robotical policing. And we literally are focused on people who speed. We don't have very many road traffic officers. You literally don't see them now. And so you just imagine the number of drink drivers, drug drivers, people who are ferrying illegal people about, people who are carrying guns, jewelry, etc., in their car. It's basically, if you don't speed, you haven't got a problem. You're very unlikely to be stopped by anyone. So the police are missing out on a huge opportunity to actually detect crime. And by their absence on the roads, of course, the public safety suffers. So I would like to see far more police on the roads doing the job. They have a huge deterrent factor, and they actually get involved in detecting criminal offences when they're engaging with motorists. And that literally goes by the by now. It literally is. We're obsessed with speeding. And of course, the other thing is, it's bad driving that causes accidents. I'm not suggesting people should speed, but, if you're going 35 miles an hour in a 30 limit, that's not particularly dangerous. But, if you're meandering across the lanes, if you're not concentrating or you're driving badly, well, the cameras don't pick that up. It's undetected. And that's something that really should be brought to account, and it's not. It used to be, it isn't anymore. And I do think the presence of police on our roads does have a huge deterrent effect on the way motorists drive. And that's now absent. So we look out for cameras and not police officers.
Interesting you say that, because certainly a lot of my listeners seem to think the same thing. There is a lack of traffic police, and they like that sort of human touch. But it's odd in a way that you, as somebody who's going to be representing people who've been done by the police, you are actually in favour of more traffic police.
I am, because I think that they have a very useful role, and that role has completely gone. As I say, the obsession now with robotical policing is, are you speeding? That's it. And obviously people value their licenses, and, that cameras do have a role to play. But just by themselves, no. It's an abrogation of duty, in my view. A police officer plays a vital role on our roads. And, you go to foreign countries and you see them up and down the roads all the time. You come to England and you literally can drive from London to Manchester and you don't see one solitary patrol. And in my view, they're missing a trick, a huge trick. And, we all want to live in a crime-free society. So that they need to detect crime, and there's a lot of crime that could be detected if they did their jobs on the road by starting quite innocuously and just pulling someone over who's not driving properly, or they might see a vehicle, or they might recognize someone in a car. If they're not there, all these things, they don't get detected.
And do you find, as somebody who does represent people, motorists, do you find that on those rare occasions where there are actually police pulling you over, that they show a flexibility? Because my recollection is that did used to happen, that they'd sort of sometimes give you a bit of a warning, say that was a bit silly, wasn't it? Don't do it next time. And I'd drive off kind of very nervously and think, I kind of learnt my lesson. Does that sort of thing happen now, or is it absolutely by the book?
No, it does happen, and you're absolutely right. When you've been ticked off by a police officer, and he's let you off, you think, oh my God, that was a stupid thing to do, and I am going to be more careful. Yeah, they exercise their discretion. That's what we need. Cameras, then, as I say, it's robotical. There's no human interaction. So does it still happen? I would say it would happen if they were on the roads, but we get very, very few clients who've actually been stopped. I mean, obviously drink drive and drug driving, but in terms of speeding, it just doesn't happen.
Nick, thank you. That's Nick Freeman, otherwise known as Mr. Loophole. He's a criminal defence lawyer and motoring specialist. What's your view there?